Good afternoon. My name is Frank Ramos, and I have the pleasure of introducing today Claire Parsons, who will be talking about mindfulness for lawyers. Claire is a member at Adams Law PLLC in Covington, Kentucky, where she focuses her practice in local government practice, school law, and civil litigation. She is an active leader in the bar, in her community, and a frequent writer and speaker. Claire is also a certified meditation teacher and meditation teacher, and writes about mindfulness for lawyers on her blog, Brilliant Legal Mind, which is a great website, by the way. I really recommend you visit it. You can follow her blog on social media or connect with Claire on LinkedIn. And she was also a recent contributor to a book called Network, which I also strongly recommend. Claire, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Frank, and I'm glad that one of my co-authors for Network, Jacqueline Harunian, is also on the call. So she's also another good person to follow on LinkedIn if you're looking.
And today we're going to be having a discussion about all you do in the area of mindfulness. For those of us who aren't familiar with the term, can you define it for us?
So I like the definition that John Kabat-Zinn, the researcher who really helped bring mindfulness to the West, uses. And he says it's awareness in the present moment, non-judgmentally, on purpose. And so really what that means is you're paying attention to what you're doing right now, and you're doing it with awareness, and some level of intention. So you can do that with meditation. You can also do that in your daily life. And I would probably submit to you that the times in your life where you felt really present and fulfilled and satisfied are probably the times when you have been mindful and present and aware. But meditation, I think, is a tool that gets you to mindfulness and helps you bring that into your life more. But that's the definition I generally go by.
And it's certainly challenging for us lawyers who are either thinking about something that we did in the past or worrying about something that is yet to happen.
I think that's the nature of our practice. I do actually a combination of litigation and I think and general counsel work. So, with litigation, it's always sort of what's the next crisis that I've got to go by. And with general counsel, you are constantly thinking long term about the objectives that your client needs to achieve and how you can help them do that. So I think our practice sort of makes it harder for us to stay in the present moment, but I think when we do, I think it can help us figure out what we're doing next better. I know, like when my clients call me, sometimes they'll send me a cryptic email with like a one-line fact description of what's going on, and they're like, "What do I do?" And I'm like, "Well, first thing is you got to call me because I don't have any idea. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. So I need to know more before I can tell you what to do." And I think mindfulness for us helps us do that because it helps us get the ground level facts, what really is going on, not just our reaction to it, not just our emotions, but what is really here so that we can make wiser choices in the future.
And how did you get into the area?
Very randomly. I mean, I wasn't really necessarily looking for it specifically. I was a philosophy major in college, and I never studied Asian philosophy. And I was stranded at Barnes and Noble one time with my family after I graduated from law school, and I wandered into the like philosophy section, and there was a book on Buddhism, and I picked it up, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll read this," because I didn't know much about it. I read it and I thought, this is the most persuasive description of the human condition I've ever read. I'm going to start meditating. So about 2 years later, I actually did that when I really needed it. I had had a very difficult pregnancy with my first daughter. And then I was prepping for a wrongful death trial, a very lengthy one. And I was so busy, I couldn't see straight. And I think what really happened is mindfulness changed my life because I really needed it. I was a really bad overthinker, and meditation helped me become aware of that. But I was also someone who tended to isolate myself. I was very judgmental and harsh on myself. And so compassion practices that I learned later, helped me be kinder to myself, take risks, actually work to develop more of a community. And my life and practice just drastically changed from that. So meditation didn't do all of that, but it was like it helped me cover those ground level things so that I could really start to thrive and heal from some of my past experiences. So I found it randomly, but I think I was really maybe subconsciously looking for it.
It's funny. Our profession always seems to lag other professions about really about anything, and mindfulness is no exception. Mindfulness has been around for decades, and I want to say, really, in the last 5 years, it's really caught on in the legal profession. And you see a lot more webinars and presentations about it. Uh, I assume you speak on it pretty regularly. How do you share uh, what you know with lawyers in the field?
I don't know that it's really all that different. And I think mindfulness has really taken off everywhere in the last 5 years. It's been around, and I think more other professions have adopted it quicker. But in the last 5 years is really where I've seen changes across the board. And I think some of that is technology. I think some of that is people like Dan Harris who have really popularized it with professionals and others. But I talk about mindfulness pretty much the same way with lawyers that I talk about it with everyone else. I started talking about it with women professionals. That was the first time I ever spoke on it for a summit in my region. And when I first, then I turned that into a CLE. And when I first started talking to defense litigators, that was the first time I did a CLE. I was really worried about how they might respond to it. And I did loving kindness practice, which is the ooey gooey, sappy stuff about love and emotions and self compassion that us lawyers tend to hate. And honestly, a lot of Americans tend to, scoff at. It's really powerful, and research actually is really strong for compassion practices. And what I experienced was that, honestly, these lawyers really liked it and they responded to it and they came up and were asking all kinds of questions. And I think they can see the need for it. So I think if you present these things to people in a way, in a language that they understand, and you talk to them in a way that they understand how they can use it, I think that's the way to go about it. And I don't think you should shy away from the emotions. I think you just got to do it in the right way because we really need that.
And there seems to be a direct correlation between the profession's understanding and appreciation of mental health issues and the embracing mindfulness.
I think there is. I mean, I don't know that I would say mindfulness is really a cure for a lot of those issues because we have so many factors that play into it. I personally think that our profession's issues with diversity relate very strongly to our issues with mental health and wellness. But I also think that we have substance abuse issues. I think that the culture of the profession and the way that we make money as attorneys is probably going to shift. And I think that'll help some of these things for the better. But I do think mindfulness is something like it's like a healthy diet. I think if we have more people who adopt mindfulness practices and start to incorporate some of this into their life, I think overall we're going to have better conduct. And I think that's going to reduce stress. But I think also it's something that you can do for yourself to take care of yourself on a regular basis that makes you less at risk. So, like, if I was talking to people who were currently in an acute state for mental health concerns, or were really experienced depression, I wouldn't necessarily say you meditate and it'll go away. What I would say is you need other forms of mental health treatment potentially. You need seek support from your friends and family. You got to take that seriously because trying to meditate when you are depressed, and I've done it, it's very difficult and it can actually be counterindicated. So you got to be very careful about that. But when you've kind of recovered, when you've stabilized, or in conjunction with other things like therapy or support, meditation is a great part of that. And it can really help you undo some of those thought patterns and those internal reactions that can be counterproductive for you. And it can help you be kinder. It can help you be more ethical. It can help you find the support when you're maybe not accustomed to doing it. Because that was something that I did where I would have a problem and I thought I had to deal with it all on my own. And then I always felt overwhelmed. When I started to be able to examine my thoughts, I would seek support and everything didn't seem so hard.
And how much of mindfulness is meditation? Is that sort of the crux of mindfulness?
I think mindfulness is really what I said earlier, where you can be mindful without meditation. But meditation is one of the ways that you can incorporate mindfulness into your life. And the reason I think there's a lot of focus on mindfulness and meditation specifically right now is meditation is one of the practices that has been really extensively researched in clinical settings to understand the benefits and how it works. They are starting to study other mind body practices like yoga or tai chi, and I think some of the early results are promising, but we don't know as much about those. So other practices, especially yoga, because yoga is really about bringing the mind and the body and the breath into alignment. And so when you do practices like those, you may see similar benefits to meditation with other practices. So I kind of think meditation is something that you do for periods of time. So you could really work on that focus and the compassion and the mind and body awareness so that when you are walking around in your daily life, you have more opportunities for mindfulness and awareness every day. And those benefits kind of emerge almost miraculously. They emerge over time, and they're very small kind of instances that you just start to see. Like, one of the first things I noticed was I rushed less once when I started meditating. Like, I used to go to the grocery store and act like I was on like one of those grocery store contestant shows, and I would like run through that like I was on a timer or something. And I have no idea why, because I a lot of times I had no time restrictions. But then when I started meditating, I noticed one day I was in the grocery store and I was just walking around, and I was like, I held the door for someone. I like smiled at somebody. You know, I'm tall, so I helped somebody get something off a shelf. And it's like, oh, this is what you can live your life like. You don't actually have to run around like a maniac. So stuff like that is what you'll start to see in your life. And it's very subtle, but it can be a huge shift in terms of the impact on your life and how you interact with other people.
So it sounds like mindfulness helped you. Now you're trying to help others through it.
Yeah, and I mean, and to be honest, part of why I like helping others, I think there's a couple reasons. It continues to help me that I help others. During this pandemic, the fact that I had something to offer to other people when I was stuck at home like everybody else, that did wonders for my own mental health and my own ability to stay upbeat. But I like to talk to lawyers and professionals in particular because we are so important. And I don't want to be arrogant about it. I'm just saying, think about the number of people who you affect in your life and your practice, how many people you touch, and how many decisions you make that can benefit or harm someone else. So if we work on helping lawyers be better, feel better, I think people make better choices when they feel better and they care about themselves more. So if we can help lawyers do that, that can fix huge that can help things for huge numbers of people. So it's important to me because I've seen how it helps me, but I really believe that when we help the profession, I think we help the world.
And I imagine during this COVID-19 pandemic, the awareness of mindfulness really increased in its applicability as well.
Yes, and so I think some of that is because it is something you can do on your own. It's something that is relatively cheap. You really don't need to spend any money to get started. And I actually just wrote a blog post today about how I use free resources from a teacher named Tara Brock because she had a free podcast. I was too cheap at first. I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to keep doing this. Like, why am I going to spend money on it? There are a lot of free resources out there. And so you don't have to spend any money. And if you do, you don't have to spend a lot to get started. You don't have to invest a lot of time. You can do it on your own. Like, if it makes you nervous for people to know you meditate, I didn't tell anybody at first. You don't have to tell anybody. Now, I do think to the extent you can develop a community, try a retreat or any kind of event where you learn about it with other people, I think that really helps, but it's something you can do on your own. So I think it's a tool that a lot of people have looked to during the pandemic. And yeah, it's been very much in demand in the last year. But I was glad to do it because, it is really hard. And I think that, we have to take care of each other. But I think when we do that, I think we're all happier.
And you mentioned free resources. Your website is a great resource. Where can we find your website and what's there for us to view and read?
Yeah, so I have my website is brilliantlegalmind.com. So obviously you can tell that I'm very humble and, no arrogance at all by naming my website Brilliant Legal Mind. But It's really about, helping, keep your mind brilliant. Because I think when we do that, we serve our clients better. But what I have on the website, I have an ebook which has a real brief presentation, really, that gives you an overview of basic mindfulness steps. It gives you some problem solving tips, and kind of identifies like different practices that you might want to try out. I have several guided meditations that are available on YouTube, and many of them are developed with lawyers in mind. So they cover things like responding to a nasty email, or going to a networking event, or even trying to calm down before a settlement conference, or giving bad news to a client. So really specific to lawyers. And I also have several articles because one of the benefits of my mindfulness practice is that it helped me realize all my overthinking was ideas for writing. So lots of articles. And then I also just recently did a real brief video, a 2-minute explainer, like how to start meditating. And then there's also a PDF slide deck of that. So if you want like basic instruction on really how to start meditating, check that out and feel free to download it on the resources page.
So, assuming I've never done mindfulness and some of our listeners haven't, and we want to incorporate it with the next 30 days or so, what would be the process you recommend we pursue to do that?
I would start small. I think like here's a real easy way to do it. If you get an app like Calm or Headspace, I use Meditation Studio. Most of those have very basic intro courses that start with very brief meditations to help get you started. You could do that, do the intro course and get started. Another thing you can do, and what I really did was I just used a timer on my phone because honestly, a lot of the meditations available, like they have 1 to 2 minute meditations, but they don't have a lot. So you might kind of get bored with that after a while. So I would just do a timer for 1 to 2 minutes, and then I increased about a minute over time. In the first month, I would focus on increasing your tolerance to be able to sit for about 5 minutes. And that should make you have a lot more flexibility if you're using an app in terms of the meditations that you're using for guiding. But I would say at the beginning, what you want to be able to do is learn how to find a comfortable seat. You want to learn how to settle. So it's not so much about controlling your thoughts, it's about finding a comfortable seat that you will be alert and comfortable and relaxed, but also learning how to settle and come back. You're not going to clear your mind. That's not going to happen. But if you can learn to settle and get that ground foundation, you can then grow on to more kinds of practices. I think early on, I would then recommend looking into some loving kindness practices. And I know some teachers really recommend you stick with that breath practice for a long time. I think the breath practice is important, and that's where I would start, where you just focus on your breath and then come back to your breath. But I think if you don't get some compassion practices or really focus on that inner mental state, it will be very hard to continue on for longer periods of time. I think the response to the distractions and how you treat yourself in the meditation is something that is really important. So I'd probably start with some breath, maybe some body scans in the early phases, and then look into some loving kindness and sort of play with that. I would try to keep it fairly consistent at first, but then after a few weeks with a practice, try incorporating some of those other ones and seeing what you like. Because to be honest, I get a lot of questions from people where they're like, how do I do this right? What's the best way? And really, the best way is to let go of all of that. I think the best way is to focus on what works for you and actually focus on what feels good and actually play. And I know that those are like I'm like speaking gibberish to some of the lawyers when I say this, but that's really something that will benefit you because this is not something where you're competing with anyone else. This is not something that I really think you can do wrong. I've made mistakes in my practice and learned that I was kind of doing it wrong. But I almost laughed because it's like, hey, I get to learn a new way. I get to try a new way. And even though I was doing it wrong, it sure helped me doing it wrong for 3 years. So, imagine what doing it right will do. So, I think maybe having a sense of humor, being kind, playing, and starting small is really where I'd recommend.
And breathing and breath control is so important. Explain to us why it's important and how we can better control our breathing. I know a lot of us are kind of shallow breathers. We kind of breathe through our nose, and it causes a lot of unnecessary tension and stress by doing it that way.
Yeah, I think, and I've heard that some people actually hold their breath when they check their email and stuff like that. When you focus on something, it's kind of a natural reflex that you might hold your breath a little or not breathe as deeply. And when you get stressed, that is another thing that happens. So just during your day, it's a good idea to sort of check in with yourself and even just take a deep breath every now and then. If you take a deep breath, in and out, it'll be about 5 to 10 seconds. That can be huge in terms of a stressful situation arising and you having to, decide what to do next. So, I would recommend doing that. But I don't know, I don't actually use a lot of fancy breath work strategies. I think that's some teachers really enjoy that, and I think some people really get benefits from that. So some of your meditations may incorporate different breath strategies. There are things like counting. There are things like counting how many in and how many out. There's alternate nostril, there's box breath, there's a lot of different types. So if you like one, go for it and try it. But the real thing with the breath is to allow your breath, your body to breathe. So you want to have a good posture so you can breathe easy. You want to have an open airway. And so some of the work can be controlling the breath to get an effect. But honestly, the biggest thing is making sure you are breathing easily. And if you've read anything about the Zen school, that's one reason they focus so much on posture, is because if you're comfortable and you're breathing well, they kind of believe your practice will follow from that. So it's really important to have a good posture and breathe well. And I think part of the breathing thing as well is to let go and let the body do the work and not always feel like you have to control it.
And what type of postures or what body positions are you suggesting? You're talking about sitting down, and you also mentioned about going, I guess, going through your body in some way. What did you mean by that?
So you can meditate in almost any posture, and to be truthful, you do not have to sit still. When I meditate, I have a cushion, which is I have a zafu and a zabuton, and I have another thing for my knee, because I have a knee injury, and so I just use that for extra protection. But like I sit on that because if you sit down and your hips are a little bit elevated with your knees pointing down, it just puts you in a better position where your back doesn't have to work as hard to keep you upright. You don't need that. You can use a nice chair with a pillow behind your back. You can do standing meditation. You could do walking meditation. You can lie down. The risk with lying down, of course, is that you're going to fall asleep. So, sometimes I use that, but I usually don't. So standing meditation, you're probably going to get tired after a period of time, but you could try it and see if it helps. Like I've used standing meditation more if I have been on retreats, and it's just like clockwork at retreats. The 2 to 3 p.m. meditation session for me, I just fall asleep. It's just like my body just is like, it's time for a nap, Claire. You can't meditate. So I would do standing meditation for those because to keep myself awake. Um, but generally I would say sitting is probably the best. And it's really the most important thing is your belly is soft, your chest is open, your head is pretty upright so that your airway is not obstructed. And then the rest of your body, you want to try to, strive for relaxation and comfort. So, like if you do have a shoulder issue or you have an itch or something, you're allowed to move. It's better if you don't, but you can move. I would say, like, I do hear people talk about like walking meditation sometimes, like, I'm going to do a walking meditation. I would just say, like, if you're going for a walk, to clear your head. I'm not telling you not to do that. That's great. That might not really be the same thing as true walking meditation. Walking meditation is very slow, where you're really focusing with a lot of intention on each step. It's super awkward. I sometimes almost fall doing it. But those kind of practices can be good because they are the ones that help you bring mindfulness more into your daily life, because you're sort of practicing using mindfulness with activities that you normally do. So the position isn't really the issue. It's, I think, how you're embodying the position and what you're using the position to achieve.
And for the beginner, how often a day should one do it and for how long?
I would probably just say once a day. I would say short at the very beginning. I'd literally say 1 to 2 minutes. It may be really overwhelming with a lot of the thoughts and learning to get settled. And I would just think, like, we're busy people trying to incorporate a lot of extra stuff into a schedule that's already busy. I think it's difficult. So I would say short periods, but increase pretty consistently over time. So I'd say, 1 to 2 minutes, and then maybe add a minute every few days or every week and see where it takes you. And if you crave more, do more. I mean, but like, I would probably gradually increase over time. You can try 2 a day, and sometimes I do. And like, if you have a need for it, like if you have a meeting coming up and you're kind of worried, you could do a short meditation before you walk into that meeting to get yourself ready. So go for that. Um, but what was the other part of your question, Frank?
Oh, no, I think you answered it. How long do
Okay.
you go for your sessions?
I do 30 minutes, but some days that
Wow.
just doesn't happen. And that actually, I have done more. Like, I've done about 45 minutes in some retreats, and sometimes done longer sets, and my body just doesn't like it that much. So I don't necessarily think that a longer period is always better. I've had more success with 2 20-minute sessions a day or 2 half-hour sessions a day than I have with 45 minutes. And that's just because, like, my leg, like clockwork, goes falls asleep at about 20 25 minutes, so it just becomes painful. So those kind of things are what I'm talking about when I say play with it. If you don't like one thing, see what the problem is and see if you can fix it, and try something different, and not get judgmental about it, but just try something else, and you might get really a lot better results.
And for those of us who are trying meditation and we're having a hard time clearing our mind and staying in the present, what advice do you have for us?
Stop trying. You're not going to clear your mind. There's some people that have cleared their mind and they're all dead. The mind is, you wouldn't fault a dog for barking, so why fault your mind for thinking? That's what the mind is there to do. And so it's really not about clearing your mind. It's really more about seeing the thoughts arise in your mind and learning how to not get sucked into them every time, not following the story, not being troubled by them. And here's how it kind of can work. Um, I used to have, a lot of anxiety type thoughts when I was a new attorney. Am I doing this right? Oh my gosh, that's due in 2 weeks. Will I have time to manage everything? Oh, am I a bad mom because I had meetings 3 nights this week? Like, is that too many? Like, those kind of thoughts are thoughts that I had. When I started meditating, I could then see the thoughts and I could say, wait a second, am I a bad mom because I had 3 meetings this week? Would I say anyone else who had 3 meetings in a week was a bad parent just because of that? No. Would I? And then I would say, well, how am I going to make all this stuff work in the next 2 weeks? If I kind of can see that thought, I can say, well, I think I'll figure it out over the next 2 weeks, or I'll sit down and write a list, or I'll develop a plan, or I'll delegate. So that's kind of how getting outside of the thoughts can help you, because, if you can see them as thoughts instead of seeing them as just reality, you can then challenge or question or decide if they're useful. I mean, sometimes when you're meditating, you're going to, think about something you said to your best friend in 3rd grade and how it made them mad. And one of the things you might think is, well, that was an unfortunate incident, but is that useful for me to think about right now? And probably not. Or you might think, is this useful to deal with right now? Or maybe I should call my best friend from 3rd grade and see how they're doing and check up. That's a useful thing. So that's kind of how, like, being aware of your thoughts can really help and just change the game for you.
That's great. Do you mind walking us through a short meditation?
Yes, and it's 12:30 now. Oh, I thought we had a question, but I just had a chat from a friend. So, hello.
By the way,
So
it's a good point, Claire. If any of you have any questions at all, I didn't mention this at the beginning of our presentation. Feel free to chime in. You can type them up. I think in the bottom is a little chat feature. You can type those, and they'll appear on the right side of our screen. Claire will be happy to answer those questions for you.
yes, thank you, Jackie. I appreciate it. Yeah, and since we are recording, if anyone has concerns about questions, if you want to ask something in the chat and we don't necessarily have to say your name on the recording, that's fine too. But I think we maybe do have one.
Yes, it says, can you provide the website location for all the information you've mentioned so far? You
Yes.
mentioned your website, and I think you also mentioned another website where you receive certain free items for meditations and resources.
And actually, so my website is brilliantlegalmind.com, which I just sent. We are on WordPress, and we are also on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and you can follow on any of those. We also have a YouTube channel, but most of those videos are linked on the website. The woman who has the resources on her website, Tara Brock, I just did a blog post today. I'm going to do a recommendation series every month. So Tara Brock is our first recommendation that was posted today. And there's a link to her website in that post. And that post should come right up when you go to brilliantlegalmind.com. So she's got all kinds of resources, and I would check that out. I also would recommend 10% Happier, the podcast, and the app. I think even the free version of the app has quite a bit, and the podcast has some free meditations as well.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that book? It was a great book, and some of our listeners may not be familiar with it.
Yeah, and actually, Dan Harris has two. And 10% Happier is a book about Dan Harris's journey into meditation. If you don't know Dan Harris, he was an ABC News correspondent, and he had troubles with anxiety and addiction, and he had a big meltdown on national news. Peter Jennings, one of his mentors, put him on the religion and faith beat, even though Dan, as by his own admission in the book, would admit that he was kind of a jerk and not really super spiritual about anything. And he found meditation that way, and was really impressed by the benefits and started doing it. And it changed his life. And he ended up, kicking his drug habit. He found a wife and now has a son. And then he started a podcast and a business and developed an app about meditation. And I actually kind of like that Dan Harris admits that he's kind of a jerk and he's kind of cynical in the book, because I think it kind of gives hope to all of us. I think, sometimes I think people think you have to be calm already, or you have to be extra kind or some kind of a saint. But really, that's not what meditation was developed for. Meditation was developed for all the people who aren't saints. And so it can help you be better or just be happier. So you don't have to change. I don't think meditation changed who I was. I think meditation helped me be who I am, and made me happier as a result.
Oh, and there's another question here about would a consistent meditation practice ease that feeling of being stuck with too many thoughts? This is by one of our attendees, Valerie.
I don't make promises as a lawyer or as a meditation teacher, so I think it very well could. I will say that the research was really confusing to researchers for a while about meditation, because they got some conflicting results. What they ultimately have found is that the type of practice you do determines the benefits you get. I didn't really talk about mantra meditation. I don't really do that. And I think because I'm so verbal already, I don't need improvements to my word skills and things like that. But a breath practice, any kind of practice that you do to develop help with focus and awareness, I think would very likely help with the overthinking and the excessive thoughts. Here's an example and an analogy that I've kind of found out for myself. When I started meditating, my thoughts were very much like how they used to try to put as many people in a phone booth as possible. They were crowded. I couldn't let go of some of them, so they hung around for forever. When I am meditating and when I'm more open, it's more like open gym. I can kind of expand out. I can let all those thoughts play or chill or come and go as they please. I'm not so attached to them, and it's just not as intense. And I can also see which thoughts are good or bad, or hey, that might be a good article. Ooh, that's a good idea. Oh, that's a waste of time. Don't go there. You know, it's that kind of a scenario for me. So I think it definitely has that potential. But I think like what the benefits really are, I think you have to play with it, try it out, and see, because it could be you might even get other benefits that may still be beneficial to you, even if it's not exactly what you're going for. But I think it would be unlikely that you would start to meditate and that in some way the practice didn't help you deal with those thoughts or being troubled by them.
And I imagine it also helps with your creativity. As you mentioned, you have these ideas suddenly having a lot more space and taking hold and coming up with, as you mentioned, new article ideas or other ideas.
Yeah, I think some of it is just being able to notice the idea. So I let them spread out and I slow down enough to see instead of just walking around and sort of being vaguely distracted by my life because of the thoughts in my head. That is part of it. I think the compassion practices are part of it too, because every time you say, "May I be at peace," you're saying, "I deserve to be at peace." And so when you do that, when you have an idea, you don't automatically discount it as bad because you don't have good ideas. You say, "Hey, maybe that's a good idea." And then maybe you also then reach out to a friend and seek support and like, what do you guys think? And they like it. And then you actually go on with the idea instead of just holding it and not doing anything and feeling stuck. So it's a combination of both of those things for me.
And I'd mentioned earlier about you running through with us a short meditation. Would you mind doing that for us?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. So, and if you have questions after this, feel free to type those after as well. But what we're going to do now is just a real simple, basic practice. As I said at the beginning, I think if you're trying meditation out, it's great to start to learn to settle. So first of all, I know many of you have your screens off, so that's fine. But you just want to find a comfortable and stable position. And that means sitting fairly upright in your seat. You want to sort of stretch up tall, but you don't want to feel like you're straining. And you want to be in a balance between being alert and being relaxed. So you don't want to be slouching, but you don't want to be too tense. And I always start by just feeling the weight of my body in the seat, feeling my hands resting maybe on my legs or the table in front of me, feeling my feet root into the floor. And as you notice those sensations, just start to lower or close your eyes. And then I always check in with my body. Instead of doing a full body scan, we'll do a quick body sweep where I check in with the areas that often kind of hold residual stress without us knowing it. So, first, check into the area of your brow. Just notice if your brow is knitted or tense and let that go. Check in with your jaw and your neck and your shoulders and see if you can let the jaw unlock. Let the shoulders fall back away from your ears. Check in with your heart and your belly. You may feel emotions there. That's where emotions tend to register. But let that belly be soft so the air can come in and flow out easily. And then just check in with your mind if there's any thoughts going on, your emotions, the kind of energy you're bringing in. You've been sitting and listening for a while, so that could include anything from what you're doing before, or maybe being a little tired from just sitting and listening. And whatever that is there, just let that be there. And then I would just ask you to consider what brought you here today. Um, What is your intention for being here? Are you just looking to rest? Are you looking to try something new? Whatever it is, just notice it. And now that you've settled, we're just going to focus our attention on the breath. And I'd specifically instruct you for this meditation to focus on the out breath. And the reason for that is our out breath helps us relax and let go a lot. And I think attorneys often need that help. So when we're focusing on the breath, I want you to focus on how the breath feels in your body. Not thoughts about the breath, not worries about whether you're breathing deeply enough or perfectly. You want to feel the breath in the body. And this may be difficult at first. You may wonder where in the body you should focus your attention. You could focus it on your nose with the cool and hot air flowing in and out, or your sinuses or your throat. You may notice feelings of rising and falling in your chest or belly. Just pick the area that's strongest right now and see if you can find it. And if you struggle at all finding it, just find whatever sensation works right now. It's only a short period of time. It took me quite a while to really find my breath when I started practicing, so it's okay. So just sit with your attention on that inhale and then that exhale. And when I say to focus your attention, notice the energy of that focus that you're bringing in. We lawyers often like to go straight at any problem. We like to be aggressive and tenacious. I don't want you to cling to the breath like a life raft. I want you to settle on the breath and ride it, sort of like a child might go backward and forward on a swing, where they let the swing do the work and you're along for the ride. And just continue to notice that inhale coming in, filling up your lungs and your belly, and that exhale going out. If distractions arise, whether sounds or thoughts or emotions, just know that that is normal. That's what your body does. That's what your mind does. That's why meditation exists. Just come back to the breath. Come back to the sensations that are there. It may be easy in human nature to start to judge yourself when those distractions arise. But see if you can catch yourself doing that. Judgment is only another distraction. So if you get into berating yourself when you get distracted, it takes you more time to get back to the breath. But it's also a chance to practice compassion for yourself. So you can bring more kindness and peace into your daily life. So just come back. There's no need to judge. Just come back to the inhale and the exhale and how that feels in your body. This can be difficult to do over and over again, to just come back, but that's the practice. And that's a practice that can matter in our life. Because if we have mistakes in our life, if we have people in our life who make mistakes, maybe we can focus with them more with compassion and kindness and solving the problem when we do this practice. So we just come back to the feelings of the breath because it might help us in our lives. And as we prepare to close, just check in with yourself again. Notice if there's any difference, accept if you struggled at all. But either way, congratulate yourself for trying something new. Maybe wish everybody on this call and everybody who maybe will watch this video later well, so that we can all try to make our profession and our world better. And when you're ready, take a big, deep breath in, fill your lungs all the way to the top, and let it go. And then you can open your eyes. So I will give you guys a moment if you want to ask any questions in the chat, or I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself, but
I think they can. Let me see if I have that set up. Yeah, they should be able to do that. Claire, while we're waiting for any questions, I wanted to ask you, I assume this meditation will be found on your website or something similar to it?
yeah, something similar. This one I actually just kind of I just did. Sometimes I've prepared them in advance, but I have some similar ones. And I think one that is really, I think, popular is the Clear Your Mind meditation, which is really about like reminding you that you really don't clear your mind. So that is one that a lot of people tend to enjoy.
And if folks wanted to like either create an area in their office or at home where they could meditate and they wanted to go the extra mile, what are some of the things that you would suggest they get, either a pillow or a candle or music in the background, whatever? What are some of the things that you found helpful over the years?
I use the Calm app actually to meditate, but I don't do the guided meditations. I like the sounds. I like the nature sounds, just a little bit to sort of make it just a little nicer. That's one nice addition. A candle can be great. You want to not get something super strong so it's not distracting to you, but that can be, I think, something that if there's something pleasurable and nice that you can add to the practice that makes you feel good, I would say do it, because if you couple a nice thing with something that maybe feels like more of a discipline, I think it just softens it up and it makes it more likely you'll want to do it. But yeah, a cushion can be great. And actually, it used to be you couldn't find this on Amazon, but now you can find meditation supplies on Amazon, or you could just use an old couch cushion, or a towel or something. You can, or a yoga block or a yoga bolster might even work. So stuff like that can be beneficial. But you truly don't need any equipment. I just kind of put a cushion like in a corner in my house that would be out of the way. But sometimes my dogs sit on it, and that's just part of life. But
And for attorneys who want to bring this back to their office, or at least open the minds of their attorneys to their office, maybe there's some hesitancy or pushback. Any suggestions about that in addressing those issues?
I would not nag people to do it. I would make opportunities available. I have my husband, is stressed out, just like us lawyers. He's a CPA, and I've tried to encourage him, and it just doesn't work. But what does work is showing interest in it yourself and being happier and happy about it. My kids sometimes show some interest in it because I do it. I would just say, like, my kids eat their vegetables, and it's not because I forced them to eat their vegetables when they were little. It's because I love cooking, and I'm like, oh, look at this beautiful radish, and oh, look at this lovely cabbage. And they're like, what? And they just want to try it then. They're like, what the heck is mom talking about? So I think, making opportunities available is the best way. Avoid nagging or pushing, because really, I mean, these practices are personal in nature. So, different things work for different people. And so I would avoid any judgment about it, but I think it's great to make it available. And, that's one reason on the blog that I'm going to use, like, I'm going to talk about funny stuff. I'm going to talk about real stuff. I'm going to, sort of be silly at times, because I want people to understand that this is for human beings, and, not just for Zen monks.
And where do you see the future of mindfulness in the practice? You see it expanding even further and taking greater hold?
I know that some states have mindfulness requirements in their CLEs. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, because I think it's important. I think it's personal, but I do think that's a good sign that those states are paying attention to wellness. I think you're going to see more training options available. I think you're going to see more voices available to talk about it and share different stories. And I think that's good, because I think not only is mindfulness not for everybody, but the same kind and the same approach isn't for everyone, which is why it's great that there's so many teachers out there. So I think you're going to see it more, but I think you're going to see more variety as well.
And if folks want to reach you, what's the best way of doing that?
Probably LinkedIn for me personally. That's always where I am, but you can also find me on my firm website, adamsattorneys.com, and just email me there as well.
Well, I don't see any other questions. I'll give it one more minute. Oh, I have a question from Kyle. He's,
First of all, great stuff, Claire, and thank you for doing this. This is fantastic. What advice do you have for using mindfulness in the courtroom? 2 minutes before opening statement, what can be done to kind of control the adrenaline? Sometimes my mouth gets really dry, and I can feel my breath getting short, and I'm not speaking as well. What kinds of ways can we use mindfulness to battle that?
I think there's a bunch of ways. So I think on the front end, you use it by establishing good habits and routines to help with that. So, one of the things I use in addition to meditation to calm myself down is, like, if I have a big thing or a big presentation or something, I'm probably going to try to work out before then, because that actually helps me reduce stress and avoid that. So I think on the front end, you're managing things for yourself. In the moment, I would probably recommend something like a grounding strategy. So for that, like, body scans and body awareness can be really helpful, because you can disrupt the chain of thoughts. A lot of times what happens is, you've got something big, you get your thoughts going, and then you kind of can spiral out. And it's hard to pay attention to what you're saying and what you're thinking at the same time. And then your body starts going, because your heart's beating, your breath accelerates, and all of that. And when that happens, your mind literally shuts down. So the way to calm the body down is really to stay with the body. It's not, you don't calm your mind down and the body follows. It's the opposite. So a grounding practice where you focus on what's going on in the body can be very helpful. I had a meeting once where it got tense, and I started to just notice my arms kind of like go nuts with just like sensation. And I sat with it for just a second. And then I was able to calmly say, we got to take a break right now. And we did. I had an oral argument at the Sixth Circuit, my first one, and I remember just grounding into my feet, because I felt like I was going to float away. And I just did that as I walked up to the podium. I like felt my hands on the podium. I felt my feet on the floor. And that was just a split second, but it helps. On the back end, though, I would also say compassion for yourself, because you're dealing with something that's real. You want to do the best for your client. We have stressful jobs. So when you make mistakes, not if, when, you have to be kind to yourself and understand that you're only doing the best you can. You aren't going to control all those emotions. You're not going to stop them. It's responding skillfully to those emotions. And some of that skill is acknowledging that you won't be perfect.
and a lot of what you said about grounding, that's how you deal with panic attacks. I've read about that as well. So it's very interesting that you would make that correlation.
Yeah, and many therapists now, you may see, if you're looking for a therapist, or you're looking at a resume even for a case, that they might be mindfulness based they might have a mindfulness-based practice. And so that's because there are lots of clinical mindfulness strategies now that are available that have been studied in a research setting, and that benefits us all.
Well, Claire, any last thoughts for the group?
No, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy for all the questions and the interest. And I hope everyone just takes care of themselves and the people around them.
Well, thanks so much, Claire, and thanks for all of you for joining us. This is recorded. Once it's downloaded, Claire will, I'm sure, share it on her LinkedIn page. And if you want to watch it again or share it with others, you can do it there. Thanks so much for everybody's time, and thanks so much for joining us today. And thanks again, Claire.
Thank you.